Today's conversation begins with a word that for many people brings up fear, curiosity, or maybe even skepticism: witch. My guest, Maritza Schaefer, grew up in Chile in a family of witches where working with energy, intuition, and spirit was simply part of everyday life. But as our conversation unfolded, I realized we weren't really talking about witches after all. We were talking about power. What does it actually mean to be powerful? How do we create meaningful change in our lives? And what happens when we begin to recognize that our mind, body, emotions, nervous system, and spirit are all part of the same conversation? Whether you're deeply spiritual, simply curious, or someone who has ever wondered if there's more to healing than what we can see, I think you'll find something to reflect on in this episode. So settle in, stay curious, and enjoy my conversation with Maritza. Welcome to the Spiritually Curious Therapist, where science, spirit, and the self come together in the art of healing. I'm Jody Silverman, psychotherapist, Reiki master, and fellow seeker. Here we explore how presence, compassion, and nervous system wisdom helps us reconnect with the heart, the body, and the soul. Hello, and welcome back to the Spiritually Curious Therapist. Today we have with us Maritza Schaefer. Maritza is the founder of Bruja School and creator of the Liberation Magic Method, a practical system for transformation. Her work starts where most self-help and spirituality stop, with the missing skills for real change. Raised in Chile in a family of witches and initiated into brujeria by her grandmother, Maritza learned to work with power, energy, and truth as elements of an integrated system. Liberation Magic teaches how to make your life the most powerful spell you'll ever cast. I love that. I can't wait to hear more. Tell us a little bit about who you are, Maritza. Welcome. Welcome to the
Thank you
podcast.
so much. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and have a great conversation with you. Yes, like you said, I was born in Chile and my mom is a witch and my grandmother was a witch. And so I grew up with magic like a normal part of everyday life. And over time, I've come to learn that the word witch can be very negatively loaded for so many people. And so I want to explain a little bit about why that is and why I call myself a witch, because I don't think you say like it's a bad thing. It's a great thing, actually. And yeah, just like was brought up really understanding that not all power is visible and not everything that is real has been fully explained by Western science yet. And that's all that is. And so, really, from my perspective, bruja is the word in Spanish for witch. And so I started Bruja School, literally witch school, to teach people how to access these spiritual practices. But I think the word witch has a super negative connotation in our culture because it's really about women, people in general, but women in particular, who know how to work with power, who know how reality actually functions, who are able to access energies that we're not usually aware of. And if you think about what would happen if all people were able to do that, the entire system, particularly the economic and political system that we live in, would collapse. And so, my take on why witches are scary is that if you're one of the few white guys that are hoarding all the resources, of course you should be terrified of witches because we stand for everything that you stand against, like human rights, sustainability of the earth, caring for all, generosity, liberation, things like that, solidarity. And so that's my explanation of why witches are not scary because of anything evil or because of anything spiritual. Witches have been made to be scary for political reasons. Okay, so now that's out of the way. What we do know how to do is work magic, which I define as the craft of transforming reality, right? And so you have these like children's fairy tales where the witch turns the princess into a toad or the prince into a toad. And I'm like, okay, not quite exactly that, but yes, the craft of transforming reality means taking a particular state, in the case of the story, the prince, and turning them into something else, a toad. I think that's obviously more metaphorically than not. But with magic, you can take parts of your life that you're not necessarily particularly fond of and turn them into something different. And that's what I teach people how to do.
That's amazing. So it's making me think of the idea of transmutation and how we take something and make it into something else for our benefit. And a lot of times when I'm working with folks, I'll use that word in terms of processing emotions or bringing something that is stuck or something that's in the dark and bring it into lightness and transmute it into something else so that is more beneficial for them. So, saying all that, let me pause there because I want to go all the way back.
Yes,
Is that okay? Can we go all the way back?
of course.
Let me ask you, when did you come? When did you come to the United States?
I was 18 years old.
18. Okay, so what was it like for you to come from Chile, having grown up in a family of witches, to the United States?
Yeah, that's such a broad question and could go in so many directions. But I think what really caught my attention is that there's a lot of, from my perspective, very interesting, curious types of real religiosities in the United States and not a lot of spirit. And so, again, religion has been political since the dawn of time because it is about power. But I found that here it was really particularly devoid of spirit and so politicized. And also, Chile is a majority Catholic country, and so that's the more mainstream religion. But even though that's the case, the vast majority of people have some understanding of something that goes beyond religion, right? That there's a mystery, there's like a real magic in life, and whether you believe it or not, to what extent it's acknowledged. And that seemed to be a real blind spot here in the US. Things have changed dramatically since I first came here, but I think there's like a real disconnection from what I consider to be the nature of reality. And my experience of reality is that humans, we get to have a body, which is really fun, and a mind and a heart and an emotional body in that way, but also a spirit. And the fact that we are here functioning in this way has been a total mystery, even to Western science to this day. And so
Yes.
there's an aspect of mystery or magic or miracle, if you will, that is so intrinsic to the life force and to our experience as humans, and that we can be more or less aware of on a daily basis, depending on whether or not we choose to be. It's that simple. And I think that's why we talk about spiritual practices, because when you really pause to sit with that idea, I think most humans are able to have that moment of awe and wonder around, like, holy cow, how come we're here? We get to ride this rock. It's so amazing. And then you got to take the kids to soccer, and you got to make sandwiches, and you got to call the boss, and you got to get back to the client, and life happens. And so it's very easy to forget on a daily basis, which is why, particularly the way we live in this culture, which is why it's so important to have an intentional practice to not forget, or rather to remember what it's actually about, what life is actually about. And what it's actually about is such a unique and personal question. What the meaning of my life is probably different from the meaning of your life. But if I don't answer that question for myself, then what am I doing? What is the point?
Yeah, I love that question of what is the point, especially when we are talking about meaning and passion and purpose. And a lot of people are walking around trying to figure out what that is for them. And so having an intentional practice is one way of staying aligned with whatever it is that's important for you. And I love what you're saying in terms of how that's unique for every person. What was that like for you as you were coming of age here in the United States with your own personal family history, entering into this society, which you're right, religion and politics, everything, it must have, I imagine it must have been very different than what you were used to.
Not really in the sense that Chile, like I said, is like a majority Catholic country. And so there's that understanding of the church as an entity, as an organization, and the role that it plays in society. What was different for me here is the diversity of religions and different kinds of churches within the same religion and how broad that went. And so learning about so many different kinds of practices and different kinds of ways of connecting, but also about how people would call themselves a particular thing and have no idea what that actually
Mm,
meant. It's not uncommon for people to grow up in a X or Y or Z household from some religion. And what does that actually mean? They're not particularly clear on that. But I think that's true everywhere in the Western world for the most part. I think that again, I have a pretty political analysis around that. I think that
yeah.
because of our economic systems and because of our political systems and how they're intertwined, I think that if spirit wasn't a powerful thing, religion wouldn't have been co-opted in the way that it has been. And again, witches wouldn't be as scary as they are, because I think that when somebody is really connected to their own essence, to their own spirit, to a larger understanding of whatever mystery is making this all work, they become a very particular kind of person, right? They tend to be less prone to buy crap that they don't need. They need to be less prone to fall prey to fear and to respond from fear. And they tend to be really difficult to manipulate, if you
Yeah.
will. And so I think that's where that intersection is, because, and that's why my program I called Liberation Magic, because there's something about the spiritual connection that is quite literally liberatory, right? Like
Mhm.
when you find your own spiritual path, you can do anything and you can feel amazing. And that doesn't mean that your life is not going to suck at times, because nobody gets out of that. It comes with the heartbreak, it comes with the disease, the disappointment, death, all of the things that we really don't prefer. That's going to happen no matter what. That's part of the gig. And how we respond to that, how we make it the minimum mandatory level of pain that all humans get versus this horrendous melodrama that we just suffer through in perpetuity because we don't know how to do any better, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It really gives us grounding, and it's like something to fall back on, especially when the things outside of us seem to be spiraling. And you're right. No one makes it out of here without suffering. And it's part of the human experience, as we know. And it really comes down to how we show up to that suffering. And if we have the resources and the belief system and the support and the community, it makes it a lot, I don't want to say easier, but what's the word I want to use? Tenable,
Yeah.
maybe, to be in it and to get through to the other side. And so I think that's something really important that you're talking about. Religion can sometimes do that for folks,
Yeah.
and we certainly know that plenty of people have had experienced religious trauma as a result of the organizations and the structures around religion, especially in this country. And so, speaking of which, while you were talking, what I was also thinking about is that this country actually has a very particular history in terms of witches. And I'm thinking about the Salem witch trials and everything that was going on back then, and how these women were often blamed for things that were going on in the community and burned at the stake and called witches. And perhaps some of them were, perhaps some of them weren't, but either way, they were definitely scapegoats. And I'm just wondering, from your perspective, how does that land on you?
I think it's awful, but I think that's been true throughout the history of humankind. A couple of thoughts. Okay, so first of all, we are horrible beings and do atrocious things to one another. That's just always been the case. And I think that misogyny has been a real problem in the Western world. And yeah, there's been all kinds of excuses. The reality is that Oof, this is such a rich, deep conversation because what is it about women, particularly powerful women, that is so terrifying to the system? Volumes have been written about that and will continue to because it's so alive to this day. We're living through it. We're going through a peak period of misogyny right now again in 2026. So we don't have to go all the way back to the Salem witch trials to understand that there's something there that doesn't really quite sit well with the system because they just can't stop coming after us. You know what I mean? And I think that I, until we can all find our own way to reconnect to the aspects of ourselves that are energetic, spiritual. I don't want to tie it to religion because religion is, in my mind, a separate story, right? But basically, until we're all in our full humanity, we're not going to be able to transcend those things because my analysis, anyway, is that those kinds of things happen when we forget our own humanity and then act that out on other people. And it's still going on to this day.
Absolutely. In some ways, even more, or at least it's because of social media and technology and the access we have to information. It's definitely way more out there for all of us to see and witness and even turn our backs to at times, which I think some of that is starting to change a little bit as people are getting called out, but it certainly is out there as we're looking at how things are. I'm just thinking about Epstein and everything that's going on there. There's just a lot around feminine energy. And what I was also thinking about when you were talking is how the shift and the embodiment of both the feminine and the masculine spirit and that balance and what that looks like. Do you, what, yeah, you're nodding your head. Can you say a little bit about that, about feminine energy, masculine energy, balancing? What are your thoughts around that?
Yes, certainly. And all kinds of energies, right? Like when we're like out of balance, weird stuff comes out sideways all the time, right? And I think that there's a time and a place for activation, for going forward, for intense activity. And there's a time and a place for a more mellow attitude and for spaciousness and for rest. And I think that in this society, we're completely lopsided and it's all about more, bigger, faster, all the time, nonstop, hustling, intensity. And as we can see, how is that working out for us? Not so well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think it's interesting too, like you brought up the Epstein files. I think because I think about this so much. I'm like, how did we as a community, as a society, get to a place where this is happening, nothing is being done about it, and it's okay? I remember being a child and studying, being in history class and reading about horrendous things that happened throughout history, and me asking the teacher, wait, so what were people doing? Do you just like, I don't understand how this actually played out. You get up in the morning and go about your life, but that's happening. How is that even possible? And now that I'm a grown up, I'm like, oh, this is how it's possible. It's very easy. We're living through it. You know what I mean? And you can go through the list of all the horrifying things that we're doing to each other, and particularly that men are doing to the world, and particularly to women. And here we are, like trying to, the best of our ability, go about our business as if nothing is happening, because otherwise you can go insane trying to find how much power do you actually have. And so I think that's where it gets important to have your own practice and understand that you do have a role in this, but it's probably not as big as you would like it to be, and it's definitely not as small as you fear it is. And
Mm,
finding that sort of right balance is part of the journey, right? That's a huge part of my own spiritual practice. It's like, how can I do everything I can to help without giving so much that I'm not no good of, I'm not able to help anybody anymore, right? And what is my particular medicine, if you will, that I bring, right? I think that's a question that if we all paused to ask ourselves that, we would live in such a different, it sounds so cheesy to say it out loud, but it's true. We would live in such a different world.
so the question is, what is the particular medicine that I bring to the world in order to make it a better place.
Correct.
Yeah. And what would a better, I'm just thinking about this. What question would I ask around that? What would a better place be?
Again, back to your example, if we all as a society have agreed that grown ass men having sexual interactions with children is not okay, then there's consequences when we all know that's happened, right? It would be different if we're saying, oh, nobody knew and then we found out we could have done something. No, now we all know. We all know. And as a community, as a society, we are doing nothing about it. A better world, in my opinion, would be when something like that happens, we do something about it. We hold people accountable. There's steps that are being taken. As simple as that.
So accountability,
For
doing
starters, for sure. I think that what it looks like, it's actually not that hard and not that sophisticated. It's, yeah, definitely accountability, responsibility,
Mhm.
right? Stewarding of the planet itself, like respect for each other, minding on your own business, but also helping one another out, things like that.
Yeah. So that makes me think about power. And you've used that word a couple of times, right? Even at the very beginning, in terms of like, what does it mean to be a witch and how witches have gotten that scary connotation because there is this belief that witches have power over, and then therefore they must be shunned or scary or not good. And so I always find power to be like an interesting word because there, again, we're talking a lot about balance today, right? Like there's a fine line between owning your power and using your power. Can you speak about that from the perspective of being a witch and somebody who, I don't know how to say, you could, and so I'm going to say it and then I'm going to invite you to reframe it in a way that actually makes sense. So, your perspective around this balance of power, being somebody who grew up knowing that you had your own internal innate sense of power. So I'm making an assumption that's the case, but I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, I didn't think so, but yeah, totally.
So the story I'm making up is that growing up in a family of witches, that being part of that and part of being a witch is like embodiment and faith and just a sense of knowing and understanding that perhaps folks who don't have access to that in the same way aren't exposed to or aren't able to hold.
Yeah, no, certainly. Look, I think that back to your point around power, I think power can also be such a loaded word because there's so
Yeah.
many abuses of power, right? And so I think that what happens is that because there's so much abuse of power in the world, people feel a particular kind of way around power. Power, the way I think about it, is simply the ability to act. Power
Mm,
is having the capacity to do something. That's it.
I love that.
That's it. And so we all have power.
Yeah.
Everybody who's watching this had the power to open their eyes and hit play. You know what I'm saying? They had the capacity to act in that way. And so when you think about it that way, you can see how you can accumulate power to do harder and harder things. And
Mhm.
yeah, you can misuse power. You can use your ability to act in really nefarious ways. We already talked about a horrendous example around that, right? But I think that really, when we get to connect with, okay, what do I have the capacity to do? It becomes, what do I want to do and why? And is there anything getting in the way? And so then we get to relate to our own power in a very different way than like power over and trying to bully through our way of abusing other people or whatever. It has nothing to do with that. It's really about, again, I get to be a human in this time, in this body. What do I do with that? Literally, I get up in the morning and then what? And some people want to build careers. Some people want to tend to a farm. Some people want to raise children. You know what I mean? There's so many different, some people want to be university professors. Some people want to kill, rape, wage war, make more money than they'll ever have time to spend. And I don't understand that drive, but apparently it's true because here we are. That happens all the time. And so I think that really being in relationship with thinking about these things is so transformative. It just gives you the possibility to live in really delightful, freeing ways.
Yeah, and I love the simplicity of just power being the capacity to act. Or the that's it is so simple yet such a huge concept. Because I think a lot of times people don't realize that even if it's just a small thing,
Exactly.
it has the ability to build on itself. And as you move through life, knowing that you have the ability to act helps us come back to ourselves and our own power. And I think that's a really important point to make. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's because so many of us, again, because of the culture that we're like in, we think that unless it's this big, fantastic, explosive thing, it doesn't count. And it's like, no, your life totally counts even if it seems really simple or mundane or not spectacular, it's the one that you have. And so I was just thinking again back to the example, like in terms of the politics, right? It's like, oh, I don't have the power to change this administration. I'm like, not in one fell swoop, but I do have the power to, again, cheesy, but it's true, to talk to my neighbors, to make sure they're voting, to make sure they know that their vote may not count very soon, and think about how we can do something about it, and all of those things. Tiny little power does add up, and that's why if it didn't add up, there wouldn't be so many systems in place to keep us disempowered.
Yeah. Yeah, that is say that is a really powerful statement.
Yeah, in activist circles, if you think about it, it's like protests don't work. Okay, so then why are they always being shut down? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's got to be something there, otherwise they wouldn't be such a threat.
Absolutely. I'm just thinking as you're saying that when you're wondering if you have power, one way of knowing is to look around and see if there are people trying to stop you from doing it.
Totally.
Yeah.
100%.
Especially when we're talking about politics and the things that are going on in the world today.
Yeah.
So I'm going to shift for a minute and
Yeah.
bring us a little bit more focused. Tell us what it's like for you being a witch and bringing this into the world to try and help people. How did you come
Um,
to do the work and what is that like for you?
Yeah, great question. I wasn't planning on teaching this. I didn't, for the longest time, I didn't know there was an it. Because for me, it's like a fish in water.
Yeah.
Describe the water. What? I don't even know what is water? It's like how things are. It was, but I think again, over the decades, people were always curious. I think that humans in general were super compelled by magic and the mystery and all of the things that we've been talking about today. And so when somebody catches like a little glimpse of that, we tend to lean in. It's like, wait, what? How do you do it? Is that real? What's going on here? And so I would always get people around me wondering about how do I live my life and how do I work magic? Because I'm also quite open about it. And then they would see like the evidence. It's like, how do you manage to have all of these things work out? I work magic. And so I've always tried to help people with their spiritual paths and their spiritual questions. But most specifically, what happened was I actually have a friend who ran the programs at this beautiful retreat center that invited me to do a weekend on magic in June of. So needless to say, it didn't happen because it was the middle of the pandemic. But I was already excited to do it. And so I moved it online. And then I grew it from there. And so I've been teaching the Liberation Magic program, yeah, for the last 6 years now. And I developed it into a 13-week program where I teach you spiritual practices, a bunch of different energetic tools, magical tools, and it's organized around spell casting, which is a ritual for working magic. Again, magic being the craft of transforming reality. So people usually come because there's something in their life that they really wish was different and they haven't been able to make it shift. And so I'm like, great. we've got the tools for that. Come on in. And in the process of really getting clear on what it is that they want and what's getting in the way and how we're going to make it happen and how we're going to work with energy and spirit and other invisible allies to make that transformation real, people pick up all kinds of different spiritual tools and diagnostic tools for their lives and understanding of their role and practices to stay connected and feel open. Yeah, and we do that in a season.
That is beautiful. So you do it like once a quarter? Is
I
that,
used to do it like that, and now basically have people come in anytime because it was just really hard to
oh,
get people to, it doesn't matter. Basically, right now, it's a season whenever you choose it to
the
start.
season is whenever you choose to start. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know what you mean. It's hard to get cohorts that are all lined up at the same time, I imagine.
More than anything, it's just like when somebody feels ready to do the
Hmm.
work, they want to do it. I totally understand that. And I think that happened for me because when I tried to understand like why people were compelled by the work, consistently they were saying things like the time was right. And so I just want to make it available for folks when they feel the time is right, rather than like, no, you gotta wait, or it's not really till next year if you're ready now. I'm on a mission to make this as available as possible to people when they're ready and interested.
Let me back up for a second because some of the things that you talk about is that most folks who come to you are people who are on this journey and have already done some kind of work, like whether they've been in therapy or they've done some nervous system regulation.
Correct.
What is it about the spiritual practices that you teach that brings them to that next level in terms of, I think what I'm hearing you say is actually like making change.
Yeah. So I think that there's, again, a spiritual component to our lives that most people are not fully connected to and are not fully open to for a bunch of different reasons, that some of which we have already discussed, right? And so if you think about, we have a physical aspect, namely our body, and an intellectual aspect, namely our mind, and there are an emotional lives and heart, and then our spiritual lives and energy. There's very few spaces that I've encountered here that are truly acknowledging all of those things as equally important and equally valid, right? Like out in the world, most of the emphasis is on our minds and our bodies in terms of like intellectual processes, particularly when you see white collar careers or everybody's like from the neck up, which I'm sure you're pretty familiar with given your work,
Yeah.
and the material world, like how much money we make or how all of the physicality of our experience. But then, as you well know, the emotional pieces and the spiritual and energetic pieces are as important as, like, each one of those are 25% of us. So any piece that gets left out, we're going to be like wobbling along. And so I think that's a huge part of it, like being able to integrate truly all aspects of ourselves and see where there's like a lack or an overemphasis. And that's what might be getting in the way of us being really fulfilled and doing what we want to be doing, as well as understanding that we operate in different levels of consciousness, right? So while our conscious mind might have a very clear desire, if our divine self is, just to anthropomorphize and characterize it so that we can understand it, if our divine self is like, yeah, no, it's not the right time for reasons that are unbeknownst to us, like that's just not going to happen. In the same way that if our subconscious mind has a foot in the brake, it's not going to happen. And when we go around our lives not aware that these elements are playing a part in our lives, of course we're gonna get stuck. It's, we don't have the full, it's like trying to cook a meal with a fork. And no, you
Mhm.
can do it, but you're missing like some pretty key pieces that would make life a lot easier.
Yeah. How do you see the interaction between, say, like our divine self, our body and our nervous system, and
Mhm.
our subconscious?
Yeah, I always tell my students that when you're able to align your conscious mind and your body, and the four aspects of yourself, and your subconscious mind, and your divine self, you can literally do anything. And so, having that as a practice, learning how to do that is super important. And I think that what's different about what I teach is that you can hear that your thinking creates your reality,
Mhm.
which is true. And then, oh, your body feels a certain way, and then your thinking changes, which is also true, right? And so, if I think again about the aspects of ourselves, the physical, the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual are all connected to each other, and they all can have impacts on each other and outcomes on each other. And that doesn't just go one way, it goes many different directions. And so, having that, being versed, if you will, having that literacy, if you will, about how those things work is super empowering, to abuse the word of the day here, because then you're able to understand, like, if you're thinking about something so that you make a change and that's not working, maybe it's time to move to another part of yourself. Again, to your practice, maybe we start with the body and
Mhm.
then the thinking changes, or maybe we start with the spirit and then the emotions change, right? And so just having the full picture of how aspects of ourselves interact with each other gives us a lot more choice and a lot more agency in terms of where do I focus my attention so that I get to whatever outcome it is that I want, or whatever experience it is that I want to have, in a way that it's a lot harder if we don't have that map, if you will.
Yeah, or the awareness that there are those different aspects at play all the time.
Exactly.
Everything's, some things are in our conscious awareness, but a lot, I forget the percentage, but I don't know, it's 87% is happening beyond our awareness. And whether that's in our subconscious or divine intervention, or both, we are not always aware of it. And so I think the more that we practice connecting to those aspects and just having awareness that they're there, the easier it is to take a pause in the moment to be like, wait a minute, something's not quite lining up for me here. Let me back up, get realigned, and then move forward again, which, as I'm even saying that out loud, is in effect power, which is what we're talking about here, right? Because it's the
Totally.
power to act.
Yeah, no, and if you're not aware of your full experience, because at any given moment, your experience has a physicality to it, of course, but also an emotional component and an energetic component, and spiritually and intellectually, and all of the things. And the reality is that if we were fully aware of all of that at every moment, we couldn't function, right?
Correct.
We are meant to be unaware of many things a lot of the time, because otherwise we would just be like, in a state of absolute awe and paralysis at everything that's actually going on. The filtering of the mind is super, super useful. But having the ability to plug into that, to become aware of that, so that then, like you said, we can make choices that otherwise we don't even know we have. That's where the magic literally lives.
Yeah. Okay, let's slow that down and say that again, because I think that that was really important. If we can slow that down and make choices that we don't even know we have. Is that what you said?
Yes, I think something like that.
Something like that. Like we could go back and play
But
the
I
two.
think, yeah, because it's like I said, you're talking about really being aware of what's going on with us in all different aspects of ourselves. And most of the time, we don't know, not because, I don't know, we don't care or we're dumb or whatever, but because we are living life,
Mhm.
right? And so that's why we talk about spiritual practices, because it does take a separate sort of moment, a different kind of awareness, a different kind of attention to what's going on with us and how we're responding to it, to then have a lot of openness of parts of ourselves that we are usually not even realizing are there because we're too busy with daily life. And from that place, our perspective can shift so dramatically, because we're literally seeing things that we didn't see before. And so the options open up in ways that we usually are not even able to imagine unless we're actively purposefully engaging in those things.
Yeah, I talk about that a lot in terms of widening the spotlight. That
Yep.
oftentimes our spotlight is like this little one little tiny stream of light. We see the one possibility, and there's actually infinite possibilities. And if we allow for that, then a lot more options show up. I always say I have a mentor who used to say there's option A, there's option B, and then there's option C, which is the one we don't even know exists yet, which is so freeing when you're feeling stuck in a place of needing to make a decision and not knowing what to do. Just trusting that the right information will come to you. I have a question about how all of this ties into this idea of witchcraft being the craft of transforming reality.
Yeah, magic being the craft of transforming reality. Because when
Yeah.
you're able to have some sort of ability with these awarenesses and you have the skill to see, to make some choices, then, like you were saying, things open up so much, right? And so things that were not available to us, like things that we didn't think we could make happen, in other words, places where we didn't see our power, all of a sudden we have the technique, the mechanisms, the tools to find our power. And when that desire for that power is aligned with our divine selves, our regular consciousness, our subconscious minds, we're not going to be able to help but make happen what we want to see happen. That's sort of the premise, if you will, of the magic, right? We use the aspects of ourselves as diagnostic tools to better understand what's in the way of making happen what we want to see happen. And then
Mhm.
when we have that clarity and put it behind an intention that's aligned with your subconscious mind and your higher self, that's it's funny. I was gonna say that's literally all it takes. It's not a big deal. It is not a big deal. And you know what? It's funny. I had a student that learned magic and had a fabulous experience with it. She was so delighted. And we were talking about this, and she's, yeah, it's not a big deal once you know how. But she had been trying to learn and didn't, was always missing a piece and didn't have the full system, if you will, and always felt inadequate. And then after she went through the Liberation Magic program, she felt, oh my God, okay, now that I know how, I get it. It's totally happening. But that's the piece I think that I'm here to share. It's like apparently this is not well known for the vast majority of people, that magic is a total thing and you can use it, and that you have to make it happen. In other, not make it happen, but magic always works if you work it. Because knowing about all these things, and I'm even, this happens to me all the time, right? Because here I am, human, living my busy life. If I don't do the things that magic requires, then of course it's not going to work. It's giving your gym a charitable donation, but never showing up and actually working out, right? It's like, no, if you
Mm-hmm.
go to the gym, you're going to get fitter. If you pay for the gym and you don't go, you're not going to get fitter, even if you're registered, right? And so with magic, it's the same thing. I can know how to work magic profoundly, which I do, but if I don't work it, it's not going to work. And but it's as simple as that. Once you have the tools and you know how to use them, it's such a delight. It's just a challenge of remembering that they're there.
Yeah, and not falling back into old patterns that's so easy to do, especially when life gets busy or overwhelming or we're activated in some kind of way. And I really appreciate you saying that because I think that's so true of anything, and especially in our culture where everyone is looking for, or we are used to having a quick fix, this idea of practice, like you said, and consistency over time,
Yeah.
and how important that is because things don't change unless we actually do the work. And I think that is so incredibly important and important for people to hear that whether it's magic or healing or therapy or fitness or any of the above, cooking. I was like, well, if you don't practice it, it's very, most people can't just walk in and run a marathon or heal their inner child. It's consistency, practice over time. There was a coach, one of my kids coaches from years ago who would say, practice makes permanent, which
Right.
I just always remembered because I think that's so true. And really what we're talking about are neurons that fire together, wire together, and creating new neural networks. And some of us need to retrain our brains in a lot of ways. And I imagine that some of the folks who come to you in doing this program, part of the work is maybe leaving some old beliefs or habits behind and creating new ones to move
Totally.
towards, yeah, this
Yeah, of
different way of
course.
being in the world. Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful. So we are actually at time. This conversation went so quickly.
Oh my God.
I know. Is there anything that we have not talked about that you would like listeners to know?
Yes, I just want to remind everybody that your spiritual path is your own. And the paradox is that while it's unique and exclusive to you, it's also easier walked in community. Even if it's not the exact same path that everybody else is walking, it's important to have folks around you to keep you grounded and sane and happy and functional. Try to find that balance, like we've been talking about, between what is it that moves you, that will work for you, but also understand that you're not meant to do it on your own.
So very important. I think that's very true too, and something we've moved away from in this society. So thank you for that reminder. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time and what you're doing in the world. If people want to learn more about what you're doing, where can they find you?
Brujaschool.com. I think my website is the most comprehensive resource of all of my tools and programs and gifts. So check that out. It's BRUJA school.com. Yeah, and I'm also in all the socials, so you can find me there as well.
Beautiful. And I'll put all of that in the show notes so that people can find you easily.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. It's been such a delight having this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here.